again, tonight we're just talking about the special education services and e-learning that are currently happening right now as part of our pandemic and our coronavirus. So we're dealing with restrictions that were put in place by the CDC and the Indiana Department of Health, and doing the best that we can, I think, as families to meet the needs of all of our students. And our school district is working really hard to meet the needs of all of our students as well. Thinking about our goal right now, when I'm working with teachers and staff members, our goal is to continue the learning process. Ultimately, it's to provide educational benefit for students during this health-related school closing. We know that nothing can take the place of direct instruction, working with our students every single day in a traditional classroom environment. But we do want to make sure that we're providing that educational benefit to the maximum extent possible. So given that, you know, we understand that there's going to be some level of compensatory service that will be necessary for our students who have an IEP, it's our hope to provide our special education supports and services to the maximum extent possible. And we'll get into a few slides later, you know, what compensatory service might look like. This is an evolving you know, concept, and we're looking for guidance from our district as well as guidance from our Department of Education. So I just wanted to share with everybody the district expectations for teachers and therapists. And so the next couple of slides are just some expectations that we laid out for special education teachers at the beginning of, well, actually maybe a week or two prior to schools closing, as we were preparing and watching this kind of unfold. And so some of the expectations that we've shared with teachers are availability via video conferencing, phone conferencing, daily or weekly check-ins, office hours, use of Google Meet or Google Classroom, Schoology, any similar application, emails, phone calls to deliver instruction. We want to make sure that we're monitoring progress, that we're answering your questions, we're providing feedback, and that our staff members are keeping the lines of communication open during this really non-traditional and unexpected learning environment. I'm asking that the special education teachers and therapists collaborate with the general education teachers regarding planning and concepts, lessons that will be presented, any accommodations or modifications that need to be made, and use of any computer-enabled universally designed features. And I also want teachers to assist parents and students in accessing special education resources and interventions that students typically have access to in the classroom. And some of those might be SuccessMaker, Khan Academy, MobyMax, Unique Learning Systems, Reading Eggs, Math Seeds, Lexia, Language Live, Schoology, the list goes on. And I know that it's really difficult for families to manage all of the passwords and manage all of the logins. And so I'm hoping that our special education staff members can assist families in accessing these research-based interventions that students participate regularly when traditional school is in setting. Some other district expectations. We are providing occupational therapy and physical therapy indirectly right now. I think that there are some therapists who are managing to provide some direct therapy, but as you can imagine, it's pretty difficult to provide that hands-on learning experience and environment for OT and PT. And so we're providing at-home therapy suggestions and ideas for families to complete on their own, and we hope to be able to grow that and continue to push out those learning activities for families and for students, knowing that this will be an area that we'll need to address down the road to make sure that we have thought about the level of service that students have received for occupational therapy and physical therapy, and how we might provide that compensatory service to help students recoup any skills that they may have lost, or to help them progress in the same manner that they would have progressed had school been in session. Our OTs and PTs are participating in case conferences with families right now to the maximum extent possible. Am I muted, Stephanie, or can you still hear me? Okay, good. We are asking our speech therapists to provide a combination of direct and indirect speech and language therapy services. So there might be, one or two sessions that are direct, and then there are indirect activities that families can complete on their own as well. And what we've noted during this e-learning window that we're in right now is that some families have limited access to online therapy or e-therapy. And so we're trying to make sure that we're supplementing those services and times with those indirect speech and language therapy services and activities that are being pushed out. And I know our speech therapists have been working really hard to make sure that they're seeing kids and that they're getting kids in groups, and that they're pushing those services out. We also want to make sure that we're conducting our annual case reviews and our annual case conferences, any transition conferences between grade levels or programs, and any revisions that need to happen through the case conference committee process, and that we're doing those meetings and conferences under the timelines that are defined by Article 7. So we have, those 365-day timelines for annual case reviews. Transition conferences, we're making sure that we're trying to get those in prior to the end of the school year so that we're prepping and planning for students moving into a different program, or moving from an elementary to a middle, or a middle to a high school program, or a developmental preschool into a kindergarten program. We're making sure that we're meeting those case conference timelines to the maximum extent possible. And we're also expecting our teachers to continue to progress monitor our students and data collect, and also report out on progress within timelines that are defined by Article 7. So many of you have heard or seen or maybe received communication from our district related to our grading procedures, and we'll touch on that briefly in the next couple of slides. But our grading procedures have changed in number grades or letter grades being assigned to specific grade levels. That process has changed and looks a little bit different now, but the progress monitoring piece of this can't change. It would take an act of Congress to change that. It is something that's written into our IEPs, and so we are obligated to continue to provide our families and our students with good data related to progress monitoring. Of course, we know that there's going to be some situations where there are specific goals that aren't able to be monitored directly, and so there may be statements in progress monitoring reports that come out and just say that per parent report, this is the growth that has been made, or no new data was able to be collected during fourth quarter related to this goal. And that would also be an indicator for us and a red flag for us that that's something that the student may need some compensatory service in. Any questions so far, Stephanie? Okay. So I do want to touch on this, the initial evaluations and reevaluation timelines. And we all know that we have lots of restrictions in place, and that those restrictions have been issued by our federal government and our state government, and it's really related to our COVID-19 pandemic, and we're following their guidelines in order to keep our families and our students safe. And those guidelines have really made it impossible for us to complete evaluations at this time because we're unable to see students face to face. Many of our components of an effective evaluation require in-person meetings and in-person testing, and that's just not recommended right now. And so I do want to let everybody know that if you have an initial evaluation, a transition evaluation from Part C to Part B, so those first steps evaluations, moving into developmental preschool, reevaluation case conferences, all of that testing has been, it's paused right now, and we will initiate that testing again as soon as we're able to gain access to students. So as soon as some of these restrictions are lifted, then we will work with families to get students in. We have communicated with many of the families who were under that initial testing timeline or that reevaluation timeline, sent letters, sent emails, made phone calls to try to communicate this, but I did want to share on this platform that we understand that we have an obligation to continue to test and monitor and child find students and make them eligible if they meet the requirements under Article 7. But those evaluations right now, unfortunately, are just paused, and we will promptly resume those evaluations just as soon as we can get access to students again. So, this next slide just talks about, the differences in the supports and services that students who are identified under Article 7 with an eligibility category and who have an IEP, those supports and services look different. So in addition to all of the general education e-learning that's being provided to most of our students by our general education teachers, special education teachers, or special education students have access to additional services and supports, and those are defined by their IEP. Activities to complete are related to goals and objectives that are defined by their IEPs. There may be scheduled meetings that your teachers of record or therapists or instructional assistants have scheduled with you to address any student needs or any skill gaps that are based on present levels of performance. You also should have access to your special education teacher, therapist, and instructional assistant to participate in Google Classrooms and Google Meets. Some other supports that are maybe different than students who don't have an IEP. Students with an IEP should be receiving some accommodated or modified work that's based on their specific student need. Access to research-based computer interventions and programs to address skill gaps and student needs. You'll continue to have those scheduled case conferences, and if you need to speak with a teacher of record, there should be some scheduled office hours that have been communicated so that teachers can work one-on-one with families to assist in reteaching and providing structure, guidance for social emotional learning, executive functioning skills, organizational strategies, etc. So I'm hoping that families have been contacted by their special education teachers and staff and instructional assistants, and they're providing these, additional supports on top of, what is considered, regular e-learning in the general education setting. So that's a lot, right? That's a lot of service, it's a lot of support, and it's a lot of work. The additional services and supports and instruction may seem overwhelming on top of all of the e-learning that's already happening. And, a couple of things that I just want to remind families of, that our students are they have a growth mindset, and we've really worked on fostering this growth mindset and this flexibility and growing forward. And during the standard school day, we have really high expectations for all of our students. And so our students are receiving all of the service and support, and it is integrated into their day. It's in the gen ed setting, it's during response to intervention time. There are pull-out times that are built into the day that address academic and social emotional groups and therapy groups. Our kids are just super busy, and every minute is planned, and every minute is structured to make sure that we can make the most of the time that we have with them when they're with us in that kind of traditional brick and mortar setting. And so they are, I think, more tolerant to some of those higher expectations because we've had them participating in such rigorous instruction along the way. And it's our goal to still provide students with these resources. We want to make sure that they have the supports and tools that they need to make progress towards their IEP and progress in curriculum. But how much is too much, right? We need to make sure that we think about being flexible, and we think about what's important to our families and what our students and families are able to participate in and complete each day. And I really am challenging all of our families to just find your balance during this time. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of emotional toll. There's a lot of mental tax that's happening right now. You know, our plates are very full, even at home during e-learning and working from home. You know, there's just a lot of taxing stuff that's happening in our lives right now. And so we just have to find our balance and be kind to ourselves, forgive ourselves at the end of the day if there's things that we didn't complete that we were hoping to complete, and just really lean into the fact that this is hard work, and the school district recognizes that this is really hard work. I give permission for everybody to just take a deep breath, and if there is too much happening in one day, just politely decline. That's all you have to do. We're going to make these services and supports available to all of our families. But if it's too much for you to have your third Google Meet with a teacher in one day, just politely decline. Or ask if there's an indirect activity instead that you can complete at your own pace. We're not mandating this. We're not saying that you must. We want families to feel like they're getting what they need, and we definitely want to make all of these extra things happen and available for our families. But feel free to just say, you know, that's not for us today, and no judgment on our part. I also want to remind families that we have these scheduled professional development days. It's actually a week at a time, so 5 consecutive days that allow for teachers to prep and plan. But that time is also designated for families to be able to maybe regain some balance, and for them to catch up on any work that may have been assigned over the course of e-learning that they just weren't able to get to or are able to complete. So during those professional development times, no new information is going to be pushed out. And it is really just a time for families to take a deep breath, revisit any assignments that they feel like they need to complete, communicate with their teachers, their gen ed teachers, their teachers of record for special education, ask them questions about assignments that are fixed, that need to be completed, that are benchmarking assignments, that are assignments that will help students make growth and progress, and assignments that are flexible, assignments that are meant for enrichment and meant to, you know, provide students with some activities during the day, but maybe really aren't being recorded as necessary assignments in the student grade book. I do want to also reiterate that teachers aren't counting assignments as late. They're not taking percentage points off. They're not, you know, halving the grade or giving students a 0 when things are turned in late. Right now, we really do want to be flexible with our families. We understand that many families are, you know, doing e-learning very non-traditionally. They're working during the day. They might be essential workers and are coming home and trying to do e-learning at 6 or 7 o'clock at night. And so we want to be cognizant as a district and be as supportive as possible to our families. So it's not being graded for timeliness, it's being graded for completion. So just make sure that you're communicating with your classroom teachers and your special education teachers if you're struggling to get things completed. Teachers have been encouraged and will continue to be encouraged to empower families to work together on this and make sure that we're getting the work done and turned in a timeline that's workable for families. So if e-learning is a flop that day, which sometimes happens, right? You're doing your best to do all the e-learning lessons and all of the e-learning activities, but it's not working for you. There's a lot of things that are going on in your home and your student's not into it, or you have a really busy day. I just want you to think about some other areas that we can focus on. And one of the areas that we focus on in the school setting that, you know, is a part of our IEP, we report out on it as part of present levels, is adaptive functioning. And when we think about adaptive functioning, we think about it in the school setting. So how is the student able to complete the routines of school? How are they able to follow the schedules of school? How are they able to learn the skills necessary for school? And that's adaptive functioning. And right now, I would just really encourage families to focus on fostering independent living skills and think about developing adaptive home skills and routines of home living. fostering that self-help and increasing independence and autonomy for our students. And I've been talking to families along the way. I've been talking to, our Special Education Parent Advisory Council, and there's no better time than right now to think about routines that we wish we had time for in the past to be able to teach our kids, but we do for them because we don't have time to do them, like putting on their shoes and tying them, like thinking about setting timers and setting alarms and all the routines that we just kind of naturally do as mothers and fathers for our students and our children, because the rigorous amount of things that are happening in our life. And right now we have this this time that we can really spend on fostering self-help and increasing independence with our kids. And I just listed, some examples here on this slide. Learning to ride bikes, tying shoes, picking out clothes, getting dressed, picking out their, I said picking out their own clothes, but I set out my kids' clothes the night before, just so that in the morning things go a little faster for us, and allowing them that autonomy of, I'm going to pick out the articles of clothing that are necessary for me based on what it looks like outside. So I know that I need shoes and socks and pants or shorts or long sleeves or short sleeves. So giving them that that independence to be able to do that. Any kind of cooking skills, anything that's happening in the kitchen, in the laundry room, working on independent restrooming, hygiene, organizational skills, sorting, cleaning, loading dishwashers, using the vacuum, yard work. I mentioned waking up to an alarm. That's a big one. Giving them that independence of, this is how you set an alarm, and this is how you get up in the morning on your own. And training them to do that right now is just a great skill that we can continue to work on. Going out to get the mail, watering flowers, gathering and taking out the trash, feeding pets, and the list goes on and on. Yep, Stephanie?
I just wanted to jump in and say this is a slide that is really speaking to all of us. There have been a lot of messages in the chat. No real questions for you, just people sharing, like, today was a bad day, and that Monday was really hard after coming back from that 2 weeks off. So people are just sharing that you're right. It is hard.
It is hard. And I think that being off for 2 weeks, so that amount of time is really hard. And we've never done that before outside of maybe winter break. And getting back into e-learning after such a lengthy amount of time of not doing that, I feel it in my family too. I have a 4th grader and I have a 1st grader, and this week has been quite honestly more downs than ups. And I've had tears from kids who love school and who are really great at being students and still are struggling to find that balance. And I just think that things are starting to take their toll, but there are things that can still be learned, and there are academics that can still be incorporated into the kinds of activities that we're doing in our life and allowing our kids to participate in those activities. And everybody can take a deep breath and know that they are filling their kids with stuff that's going to help them be successful adults and contributing members to a household and a family and to our society by just focusing on, thinking about independent living skills throughout our day. Yes, Brandy? Unmute yourself, hon.
So one thing that I kind of wanted to touch on, and I am just so grateful for this slide, is I have also given myself and my daughter permission to be creative in some of the services that are provided through school. And one area, say for instance, that she really struggles in is math, and she receives services every day. Well, I know that it's a little harder for her to do the math lessons, say, sometimes through Google Meet with an assistant. So I have told her, I said, okay, if you sit and you do this lesson with mom, you can use your Google Meet time as to do something fun with your assistant. You can tell her you did a good job. You can maybe play a game. You can read her a story. So we are kind of being creative with some of those services with mom, because she doesn't want to do the fun things with me either right now. So I
Right.
was like, why don't we do some of the work, and then you can use some of that time to just kind of talk and chat and play a game. So we have been a little bit creative too in our services that are provided to us. And that it's almost like we're using her services as a reward. And that also has been very beneficial for us.
That's awesome. Thank you, Brandy.
Sure.
Anything else about this particular slide or questions?
Yeah. Someone else just mentioned that that first week of e-learning was pretty rough for their child, but now that the pressure is off to do specials and social studies, it's been so much easier. So
Good. I'm glad we're finding balance. And our teachers are learning through this process as well, right? I feel like Plainfield, I know that Plainfield hasn't been an e-learning school district up until this point. And so, we were charged with, let's provide e-learning to our students. And I work with and alongside of an amazing group of educators who are all overachievers and who are all going to say, I want to put my best foot forward and, give all the things. And that's overwhelming when there's all of the things, right? And I think that teachers are listening to their parents, listening to their families, and trying to find and strike that balance of, work that we want kids to complete in order to make progress academically and to have educational benefit, and, work that can be completed if families want to, that are optional. And so I think that, this week, not only are we finding that balance, but I think that we're working through some of those glitches as far as how we submit work and what platforms we're using, and how to access certain resources. So I know that for me as a mom, this week has been, although overwhelming, I think that it has been really good as far as, the clarity of the work that we need to complete and the way in which we need to submit it to our teachers. So I know that everyone's growing and learning right now at the same time. We did want to share some behavior management tips with everybody, and you may or may not be doing any or all of these already, but we know that managing student behavior in the school setting is something that we definitely focus on and that we target with students, and we want to encourage our families to make the most of the time that they have with their kids during e-learning and utilize some of these strategies and behavior management tips. We just want to think about trying to vary some activities to keep our kids engaged. So maybe you're doing, a math worksheet or a page from a math workbook, but then we're adding some movement-based activities afterwards, and then we're doing reading. So trying to keep that scheduled as varied as possible so your kids are engaged during the time that they're expected to sit, but then we're giving them plenty of opportunity to get up and move. Use of a first then visual for our work. So first we do math, and then we play the iPad. So the then is the reinforcer for our kids to help motivate them to complete maybe some of that work that's non-preferred. Use of a timer to help set limits. So it can be your kitchen timer, it can be a timer that's on your phone. There's tons of apps that you can download that have timers. So we're just setting that timer and saying, we're gonna work on this specific activity for 7 minutes. And it gives kids a clear start and end. So it doesn't feel like I'm going to have to be sitting here for the next 6 hours doing this one particular non-preferred activity like math computation with no end in sight. And that timer just helps them structure their time and set some limits for their non-preferred activities. Give students plenty of movement breaks. Get them up and moving, doing jumping jacks, doing yoga, taking a nature walk outside, having a dance party, anything that you can think of to get your kids' bodies moving so that they're ready again when it's time for them to sit back down, that those wiggles are out and they're able to maybe focus more on some of that paper pencil that's happening, or that computer-based interaction that's happening. Make sure that you're staying positive and that you're in a good place to help your kids learn. And if you're not in a good place, stop it and come back to it later. Your kids are going to pick up on your feelings. They're really great at discerning and discovering what our triggers are, but also they feel what we feel. They take in what we put out. And so if we are frustrated and we are upset or angry, or we don't feel like we have time to get this stuff in, they feel all of that anxiety that we're putting out to them. So if we're not in a great positive place to be doing instruction, put it away and do something different, or give them a break. Tell them it's recess time that they've earned, and send them outside to play, or give them whatever home-based recess that you can give them indoors, and come back to it later when you're in a more positive state of mind or a positive place. Think about designing or creating a designated learning area. And for me, in our house, we've tried several areas: kitchen table. We have a desk in the office, and right now our preferred place for e-learning is on coffee tables in the living room. That's just what they prefer, and they're together, and my husband's in there with them. I'm in the dining room typically, but we have areas, a zone that's designated as the place that we're going to be learning. My husband and I have also created a schedule where we look at our work schedule every day, and we decide from 9:30 to 10:30, my husband is going to be doing e-learning with the kids, and he puts that on his calendar. He blocks it out, and then I do the hour that's right after that, from 10:30 to 11:30, and I block it out on my calendar just like it's a meeting for work, quite honestly. And that's just a devoted, designated time that between the two of us, now we have a 2-hour block that we can work with our kids and try to get them through a majority of the e-learning activities that require us to assist them. And it's not maybe strewn out along the way throughout the day. Prior to doing that, I felt like we were e-learning from 9 o'clock until 5:30 because we were just trying to fit in these little chunks of time that either one of us could manage. This has worked for our family. It's not something that everybody needs to do, but just think about a learning area and some designated learning times throughout the day. Remove those distractions from your learning area. So of course, make sure your TV's off. If the kids have questions, if you have multiple kids who are e-learning at the same time, encourage your kids to utilize their inside voice when they're asking questions of the adults that are in the room, so that they're not disrupting the learning of their siblings that are or the work of their parents. So encourage them to use that inside voice, and to minimize distractions. If one sibling's reading, the other student shouldn't be listening to a YouTube video without headphones on. So how can we really maximize the learning environment that we have in place for kids? Let students decide. I know that I get with both of my kids a document that starts with a check-in for attendance, and then lists various subjects throughout the day that students need to complete, and it looks like it's in an order. But when you actually kind of dig into it, it oftentimes, unless there's an interdisciplinary science or social studies or reading and social studies activity that are happening at the same time, you can choose which activity you want to do first, right? And so encourage your kids and give them the power to choose which activities they want to do, in what order they want to do them, so that they feel like they have some power and some ownership in this e-learning process. And it may help them be able to, I don't want to start my day with math, that's a really hard subject for me, but I'll get engaged and I'll get started with science and social studies today, and I can build off of that forward momentum. So letting them decide, which subject they want to complete, and the order in which they want to complete them. And then also, of course, just making sure that we're gathering and preparing materials ahead of time. I have a basket that I've set, just basic educational staples in, like pencils and markers and glue sticks and scissors, so that if my kids need it, they know they need to go grab that basket. They're all right there, and we're not spending time trying to find or gather those materials during the time that we're, trying to complete the activity. So if you can get them ready ahead of time and put in a designated spot, that's going to help you when you're instructing kids and letting them know, okay, this activity is a color cut and paste or a color cut and glue. You're going to need these things. They're right here for you, and you're not hunting those down instead of completing those activities. Downtime isn't great time when we're thinking about instruction for our kids. So trying to make the most of that time.
Definitely. We've had a few people throw comments out that they take a lot of breaks between subjects so that their student isn't overwhelmed. They do their own specials somebody else does their own specials each week. Another family has a Google Meet with a gen ed teacher in the morning prior to doing e-learning, and it really encourages her student. She completes her work and gets a happy or sad face when and then the Google Meets where her IA, with her IA where e-learning is completed. So she can show her IA how many happy faces or sad faces she gets, and it's been pretty successful. So sounds like people are using a lot of really good strategies already.
Great.
Beth and Stephanie, do you mind if I hop in real quick?
Yeah, great. Go ahead.
So I wanted to share, so I too am a mom of a child with special needs, and I also teach within a district. And one thing that I want to encourage all of you families is that we don't always know if something is a struggle. So if something is a really big struggle for your family, you notice, every day at writing, your child hits a block, or, you're thinking, it looks like according to the plans, this activity should take this long, but it's taking my child, twice as long. Feel free, I encourage you to reach out to your teacher, because like for me, I am up at night thinking about not so much are all of my family is going to get through the activities, but I'm thinking of, that's a really rigorous activity, or that's going to take a lot of, eye-hand coordination or a lot of fine motor strength. And I think of those students that might be struggling. And I hope that they can reach out to me and say, this is really hard. Do you have any suggestions? Or they're really struggling with this activity. Can we do this instead? Or this is really working. And so I just encourage you as a parent and as a teacher that if something is really hard, reach out to your teacher and just let them know. And they can work to offer a solution or a middle ground just to help. I wanted to throw that out there because sometimes we think it might be a struggle and we want to reach out, but we don't want to overstep.
Right.
And so we really hope that you reach out to us and let us know if something is really hard, because we want to help, especially during a time like this.
For sure. I do want to share this next slide. I'm going to click on this link. So when I do put this on the website, families, you'll be able to click on this behavior resources link. And it will take you, can you all see this document? Okay, so it will take you to this document that Shauna McLaughlin has been working on. She's our behavior specialist in the district, and there are a ton of behavior resources for our families. It includes relaxation and meditation, understanding emotions, anger management, some social skills, links and activities to be able to complete helpful articles that you might read, and then again, another list of social stories that you can work on with your kids at home. Some emotional visuals like zones of regulation and an emotional thermometer, some calming strategies that you can use in the home setting with your kids, breathing techniques, ideas for brain breaks, rewards or if-then boards. And there are actually some, I know that we mentioned an if-then visual, so you can click on that example and see what we mean by what we're talking about by an if-then visual, a reward menu, and also some behavior charts. If you'd like to implement some behavior charts in the home setting, there's behavior charts that are, rewards for home, some token boards, weekly charts, positive behavior tracking, and at all different levels. So it's a great resource for families, and I think that teachers may have been sharing a link or two, a week or a day, however they're communicating that, but we wanted to provide our families with the entire resource so that you're able to utilize any of the resources. I've made sure that the restrictions on being able to view this is off, so anybody who has this slide with this link will be able to click that link and access that document. If you're unable for whatever reason to get to our website and to get to this link, just communicate that with me. You can email me, and I'll be happy to provide you with that link as well. So just a lot of other behavior resources that you all can be implementing at home to supplement the things that you're already doing. So a big question, a lot of feedback that I've been giving or I've been getting is related to grading and some concerns or some worries about regression for students. And I do want to take a minute to think about that. Our credit-bearing courses at the middle and high school are going to continue to be graded because they're credit-bearing, and we do need to think about credits earned over the course of this semester in this fourth quarter. But I know that there are accommodated grading procedures that are in place. So, students who ended the third quarter with a specific grade won't go down in their grade through e-learning, but they are able to go up in grade through e-learning. So there's a lot of accommodated grading practices at that 8th grade. If you have students who are maybe taking some high ability courses and they're getting some high school credit at the 8th grade, but also our high school, 9th through 12th graders will continue to be graded, but with accommodated grading practices in place. Most of our elementary and middle school students are going to be graded on work completion and participation rather than being assigned a specific numerical value. So our kids who are on standards-based report cards might get a 1, 2, or 3, and then our students who are, third grade and beyond are getting letter grades. And so we're not necessarily pushing that out right now. Right now, it's all about making sure that our students are continuing to make progress and not, not assigning a letter grade or a number grade right now. We just want them to gain skills. So our curriculum is being adjusted. We're trying to reflect a balance on spiral review, as well as what concepts or what new instruction or the introduction of new concepts can be presented in the home setting, and with that eye on are these concepts that really require a face-to-face teacher-student interface. These are really, there are some very rigorous and difficult concepts that we introduce through each grade level. And so, we're shifting our curriculum maps and shifting some of our expectations and just trying to find that balance of review and progress and new instruction as far as our grading procedures. Thinking about compensatory services down the road. I know this is a big question for all of our families, and what is that going to look like? And we're working as a district to develop a plan. So I just want to acknowledge to everybody that we know there's going to be some level of compensatory service that's required. Again, nothing replaces that face-to-face interaction that we have as experts, as educators with our students every single day. So we are continuing to develop a plan to address student regression. All students are going to see some form of regression just based on the concepts that teachers are deciding are important to be implemented right now, and concepts that should be that we should wait on to introduce until we're back in a more traditional school setting. So we're acknowledging that there may be some student regression, and we want to make sure that we're developing a plan that addresses that, that we're providing additional instructional time and compensatory service minutes for students when we return to a more traditional school setting when these restrictions have been lifted. Once the plan is developed and finalized, it'll be shared with families. And we know that it's not a one-size-fits-all, but we want a starting place. So our district is working on a starting place for how we might provide that, and we hope to develop a broad plan, a starting point, and I know, I hope that there will be additional guidelines that are developed at the state level, that the DOE will come out and say, you know, this is best practice when we're thinking about compensatory services. But ultimately, me personally, as an educator, as a director of special ed, I know that ultimately our compensatory services will lie in student needs. And it's going to be, that plan will be developed based on how students have progressed, if they've made progress towards their goals, what the case conference committee decides as a team. So it's not just me saying, I think this is the right plan for compensatory service, but a group of people around a table telling each other and communicating and bouncing ideas off of each other of what's going to work for them as far as compensatory service, and thinking about the level of need and the number of hours that will be provided down the road. Any questions about that? I know it's been a big topic, and I've heard quite a bit from families about that already. Nothing yet? Okay. So I think we're coming to the end of the slides, but I do want to make sure that, you know, if there's anything that we've discussed, or, you know, things that you feel like, oh, you know, I know that now that this is a directive, or that this is our guidance for e-learning, but I haven't really been receiving that, or I don't know how to fix what's going on right now. I wanted to give you kind of some people to contact for help, and your special education teacher of record is a great person to reach out to as a primary contact, you know, regarding any kind of, you know, need or skill gap or service that you feel like your kid needs. I know a lot of families right now are really struggling with just, you know, organization, especially our middle school, high school families. There's a lot of moving parts that are happening in multiple courses throughout the day, and the kids need guidance with, how do I attack this, and what's my priority, and how do I move through the day? And so I really encourage you to reach out to your special education teachers of record, to work with your gen ed classroom teachers, contact your building principals for any support, and you can also always reach out to me if you're not sure who to contact. I will be a connector for you, and I will answer any questions that you might have. And I'll also tell you when it's time to kind of push that question back to the building level or to the classroom level, if it's something that you know, is very specific, that I might not have knowledge of. So I just wanted to make sure that I shared that. Again, if you have any questions about the names of the people who might be your special education teacher or gen ed teacher, just let me know, and I'll be happy to provide that resource for you. So I think that's the end of our slides, but if there are questions or comments right now, Stephanie, that you feel like you want to address, or you know, any kind of final thoughts, I'd be happy to take those right now. We still have 5 or 6 minutes left in the meet.
We don't have any questions in the chat that we haven't already talked about. And oh wait, one just popped up. Oh, a huge thank you. And I would agree. Like, this has been really great. Thank you for taking the time to share this with us. And it means a lot, I think, to all of our families.
Well, I'm happy to do it. And again, I'm here, I'm available. Just reach out to me and I'll help you in whatever way that I can.
So one question, should I be worried about my son transitioning to middle school?
So we are still holding those transition case conferences for families that are moving from, you know, program to program. Most students don't have a transition meeting, but if you do have direct concerns, or you're worried about what that middle school will look like, I encourage you to reach out to your special education teacher and ask if we might be able to hold a transition case conference so that we can address some of your concerns and what your needs might be. I know that it's a big, scary step. We're not providing right now kids that closure for 5th grade. I do hope to be able to provide extended school year for students who we feel like might need that extended school year to help facilitate transition, if they need to see the environment, if they need to walk the building. So I know that there are concerns about that grade level transition at any level, developmental, preschool to kindergarten, elementary to middle, and middle to high school. academically, that's not an area of concern for me. We're going to address those skills. We're going to think about, what we need to do as educators to make sure that we are filling kids up with the information and the academic skills that they need in order to make progress. But social emotionally and thinking about an environmental change, there are things that we want to make sure that we put into place for our kids who struggle with that kind of transition. So, again, if you feel like it would just be a huge burden lifted off your shoulders if you had a meeting about what the middle school would look like, please reach out to your teachers and let them know that you'd like to have a conference about it.
And then the second part to that question is, will the proper things be done to get him prepared? Will there be a chance to get the middle school on board with the conference also?
Absolutely. And so when you're thinking about having that transition conference or asking your special education teacher to schedule that, you would want both the sending and receiving schools to be a part of that meeting so that you have a representative from your current situation, current building, current program placement, and also a representative of that sending environment who can answer questions and reassure you, help you with scheduling and decision making. So it would be sending and receiving at a transition case conference. Anything else? Well, I'm going to sign off then. But I just encourage you to reach out to me if you have any questions. And thank you all so much for taking an hour of your time to hear me rattle on about e-learning. But I hope it was beneficial and that everybody's taking a deep breath and ready to think about Friday and the next week of e-learning. Bye, everyone.